Hello friends, and welcome to the Hanged Man in the Moon. If this is your first time here, welcome. Thank you for coming. I'm pleased to meet you. If you've been here before, thank you for returning. I'm truly honored. Friends, if you are a returning visitor, you already know that this is my series in which I use tarot and oracle cards to explore topics related to living the intentional life. And this is the last time I'll be using these cards in this way for a long time, because the new moon has already come and gone. So right before the new moon, I laid this spread. Next week, I'll have a mostly new set of cards to present to you. But before we dive into this beautiful spread, let me give you an amuse-bouche, an appetizer. And I'll start it with a question. Do you know the word parthenogenesis? Now, parthenogenesis is a word from biology that is for a creature, a living creature, that is able to, without the help of a partner, inseminate itself and produce offspring. Now, throughout all of the living kingdoms, mostly, a living being requires a partner for fertilization and the production of offspring, mostly. However, in all living forms, from plants to insects to aquatic life to invertebrates to vertebrates even, arachnids even, bugs, vertebrates, things with vertebrae like us. In all of those kingdoms, there are examples of creatures who are able to, without the help of a mate, without any external fertilization, generate offspring. So why is that important? Well, this week's Tarot and Oracle spread asks us to consider there are times for parthenogenesis within us, for us. Now, of course, we're not speaking of actual production of children here, not living children in the form of sons and daughters and non-binary babies, but rather our manifestations in the world, our creations. Does that intrigue you? I hope it does, because this, I think, flows very nicely from last week's spread when we were talking about keeping our cards close to the chest. Now remember, keeping the cards close to the chest is not usurping anybody else's opportunity. It's not really what we would otherwise call privilege. Gender privilege, race privilege. That's not what we were talking about when we were talking about keeping our cards close to the chest. It's when we've got this idea, when we've got this plan, when we see an opportunity and it's just not time to share it with the world. There are those times. And this flows right from that. There are times when, instead of being inseminated from our environments, our interactions with people, we'll get into it. There are times for parthenogenesis for us as well. So, friends, we've got a beautiful spread laid out. Let's take a look at it right now. This is just a beautiful spread, isn't it? I'm going to be sorry to see some of these decks go. They're not going, they're just being put back on the shelf so that I can take a couple more out and work with them with you. So if you're interested in these decks and who created them, as usual, there will be a video at the end of this video, a short clip that gives you that information. And also, in the description box below, there will be links for you to go and check out these decks and perhaps purchase one or all of them if you like. At the time of this filming, they are still all in print and available. And remember, I don't get any money, I don't get any remuneration if you use those links. Those links are just there for your convenience. So check them out. They really are beautiful decks. And we saw the spread. If you are a first-time visitor here, let me give you a brief overview of what you just saw. This entire spread is inspired by the Ace of Swords from the Tarot of the Holy Light. So in that card, there is a sword. There are 3 planets on the left with there are 3 celestial bodies on the left, the top one being the sun, and there are 3 celestial bodies on the right, the top one being the moon. And there's a dragon creature eating its own tail, sort of like an Ouroboros, wrapping itself around the sword. So what you saw was that central line of 3 cards was from a tarot deck. That is going to give us the piercing idea, right? The main idea of the spread. On the left, for the sun side, we had 3 more cards in a column. And on the right, on the moon side, we had 3 more cards from a tarot deck. And then for that dragon eating its own tail, we had 2 oracle cards, one to the left and one to the right of the central column, and those are going to give us advice for this spread. Advice for the conscious area and advice for the less conscious area, or the emotional area. So, that's what you just saw. It's a very intriguing and very rich spread. I've really grown attached to it, and I'm very grateful to the creator of the Tarot of the Holy Light, Christine Payne-Towler, for suggesting this as a possible idea, suggesting the Ace of Swords as possible fodder for a new spread. I'm very grateful to her for that. So friends, we saw the spread. Let me give you a look at that central column of cards and we'll dive in to the central message of this spread. Take a look. This is a beautiful deck, isn't it? And you noticed, I'm sure, that each one of the cards was in reverse. Now this deck is created to be used with reversals. It's intended to be used with reversals. So every time I shuffle the deck, I split it in half, I turn half of it upside down and I shuffle. I repeat that. Split it in half, turn half upside down and shuffle. So I'm constantly shuffling in reversals. And this time we had 3 reversals in succession. And I know when I am fully open, when I am receptive, when I'm grounded, when I know where I am and who I am, that reversed cards are a blessing. They are guidance. They are therapy. They help us avoid problems. They help us to expand and evolve. And yet, in the moment when the card first appears, my first reaction, my first knee-jerk reaction is still, oh shit, oh shit, no, not again. So yes, even after years of reading tarot, I still have that knee-jerk reaction of, oh no. And I know at the core of my being that these are wonderful cards and they're here to be of benefit for me, for you, for everyone. And so we had those 3 cards in reversal. And you saw from bottom to top, there were the 8 of Swords. I keep wanting to call it an ace. It's an 8. Like this. In Korean, pal. The 8 of Swords. Then we had the 3 of Discs and on top the Lover's card. All in reverse. And because there's no, for example, upright card in the center which clearly says and shouts out, this is the central core of the message. And I do believe the central card of this spread is still the core message. Because they're all reversed, and for me, the logic set of the story seems to tell me to read these cards from bottom to top. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to go from the 8 of Swords to the 3 of Discs to the Lover's card. And so, I've got the cards already here. Let me show you the 8 of Swords. The 8 of Swords, first upright. Yeah, the Eight of Swords upright, this beautiful card, the lattice work of swords, the vines growing up on the sides, the sun on the top, the moon on the bottom, everything is in its place. But you'll also notice that one of these leaves is pierced, is pricked, I should say, by one of the swords, and there's a drop of blood. Let me see if I can find it for you. Just a moment. This one, right here, yeah, where my finger is. You see that drop of blood coming from the leaf? So even in the upright version, there's that little bit of danger, but in the reverse, that drop of blood is more pronounced. The moon is above. Now, in its upright form, the association for this card is Gemini ruled by Saturn, yeah, which is also Mercury in Virgo, which Mercury and Virgo get along pretty well. Yeah, they're kind of a pair in a sense. However, in reverse, what do we have? We have Mercury in Pisces, and they don't get along so well. Now, Pisces, the water sign, depth and emotions, and Mercury is a little bit harsh for Pisces. So, Mercury in Pisces is asking us to manage our emotions under pressure. Yeah, in its upright form, I just turned everything upright. In its upright form, there's this idea of a test that a gauntlet to be run, a test to be taken, and one that we could probably succeed in if with a little bit of focus. In its reversed form, we're being cautioned that this test is going to knock us a little bit off of, or maybe very much off of center, that we're going to possibly have an emotional reaction to this test taking. And in that sense, this drop of blood is here to remind us that there is greater danger of being hurt. And so to avoid that, we want to manage our emotional state a little bit more carefully, pay more attention to where we are emotionally. Because we know, living in the intentional life, if we are emotionally open, we're experiencing love, gratitude, joy, or even just satisfaction. We're open to the powerful flow of intention, and that flow of intention is going to be bringing us into the direction of what we want. When we close ourselves off with fear or doubt or feelings of unworthiness, we don't completely disengage from the power of intention, but our ability to flow with the current openly and freely is reduced. We sink. We kind of hit the bottom and get stuck or get knocked around. Rather than floating on the surface like a boat, we get down into the bottom of the current, we can get kind of beat up. Yeah? We can get pricked by a sword. And so, this card is here to remind us to, yes, there are times when we aren't being tested, but it feels like there's a test that we have to pass. There is a gauntlet we have to run. And that sense is partially a recognition that we have already started to draw in. Instead of seeing it as an experience of intrigue and interest, we're experiencing it as a test, as a gauntlet. So we already notice that there's a contraction here. And when we do get contracted, we want to be aware. We want to be aware of our emotional state and try to, as best we can, manage it. To move in the direction of opening rather than closing and self-protection. Of course, there are times when we want to protect ourselves. We sometimes get ourselves into a dangerous situation. Perhaps even a physically dangerous situation, and that's not the time to open yourself and, well, okay, there are people who are able to do that. I'm not saying that you are one of them. I'm not saying that I'm one of them. There are times when I want to be careful and protect myself, certainly. However, when we get past the physical danger, we can move in the direction of opening. And that's when we want to pay attention to our emotional state. Under pressure. Not direct physical threat, but under the pressure, the psychological pressure, the emotional pressure of situations and events and interactions. This card also reminds us that, yes, this is reversed, but do you see that with the moon, there is a star? Giving us a reminder of the star card, our North Star. We have a guide. We know the direction we want to move in. We can go into the light. We can follow our light, follow the star. The star continues to shine through the gloom. Right now it's a really foggy day. I can't see any stars physically, but I know that my star is out there and I can feel the tug of my star. Can you feel the tug of your star? Even when we're feeling constricted, we can reach for that connection with our North Star. And when things seem to be going awry, things seem to be going akimbo, is that right? When what we created seems to be crumbling, what we have tried to do seems to be unsuccessful, we can go back to the drawing board. Now this is also a card reminding us that we can go back to the drawing board. There is no such thing as, the only failure is when we stop and stagnate. That's the only failure, and even that is not eternal because we'll eventually get out of these bodies, go back to non-physical and be reborn. Release our resistance. But we don't have to wait for that. We can do it here in these physical bodies. Yeah? We can go back to the drawing board, learn from what has happened, and expand and grow and evolve and try it again. Do it again. Do it again. Which is different from that thing that we often hear. What is the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing and expecting different results. What we're saying here, going back to the drawing board is not doing the same thing again. It's going back to the drawing board and re-envisioning, re-imagining, re-intending what we're going to do, how we're going to do it, where we're going to do it, with whom. And perhaps the environment might seem at times oppressive or intimidating, or like the prison here might feel it constricting. Now that environment could be a physical environment. We could be in a physically restrictive, oppressive situation, but it could also be an emotionally restrictive environment, or a psychologically, a socially restrictive environment. There are times when we get into those places. And yet, if we keep that North Star, if we hold that North Star, we have a direction to go in. So this is not about gaining the psychological or emotional muscle to burst, to batter our way through these swords, but rather to get the psychological muscle to define our lives and our evolution in our own terms. Because when we have evolved, these swords will naturally part, open. The path through will be obvious. Now, it's not about battering our way through, because these swords are damn sharp. We're going to get cut up. However, if we define our evolution and our own lives, if we define our own lives and the path of our intention for ourselves with trust, with belief, with hope. Hope is something I just spoke about with a dear, dear friend just 2 days ago. Yeah? Oftentimes we expect that, well, when this happens, I will regain my hope. When I start taking steps in this direction, I will start feeling my hope return. But that's not the way it happens. First, we feel the hope, and the hope draws us forward when we want to live an intentional life. When we want to live life intentionally, our hope is what brings the path into visibility, when it's what opens us up to taking advantage of the powerful flow of intention moving us through our lives. So, this card, Mercury and Pisces, gives us that warning in the sense of not danger, Will Robinson, danger, but rather warning in the sense of be aware, pay attention. If you don't pay attention, you're going to get the opportunity to learn something. Or if you pay attention, you'll get the opportunity to learn something else. Right? Because these intentional lives are lives of learning and evolution and growth and expansion. Which moves us to the next card, which is the Three of Discs reversed. Let me show it to you upright. This beautiful card upright is, we see the 3 discs. Yeah, we see 3 discs there, beautiful orbs. We see a male presenting and a female presenting figure. We see the orbs filled with stars, right? We see in the top central one, the sun and the moon. At the bottom, there's another sun shining bright. There are more vines growing up. There is a lot of plant life in this deck. And upright, this is Capricorn ruled by Mercury. Now, Capricorn ruled by Mercury, that work ethic, the work ethic to success. And Mercury, the cleverness, the communicative one. In that work ethic gives that collaborative work process, and it's a beautiful, beautiful card. I love this card. We see the eagle above, ready to take flight, potential, beautiful. There's also a band at the top which says harmony. Now, people working together, the harmony. All lovely, lovely stuff. In reverse, what do we get? We get the sun above, which is kind of nice, actually. I like having the sun above us, shining down. But, oh, I didn't mention the bird in between here. There's a bird that seems to be kind of stuck in between those 3, which is not so obvious when it's upright, but in reverse, we see that this bird is being oppressed a little bit. And in reverse, this is Saturn in Aries. Saturn, the harsh one, cutting things off from Aries, who wants to start something new and gets cut off, and start something new and gets cut off. So we can kind of sympathize with this red bird in the center of these 3 oppressive, heavy-looking discs, as beautiful as they are. And that harmony seems to be below, perhaps an internal harmony, which is where we lead as the central message, I think, of this spread. So, this card, Saturn, when it's upright, it's the long-term, it's the vision of my possibilities. What can I do with what I have on hand? That kind of possible growth and evolution. In reverse, Capricorn, Saturn. Saturn is the one of vision and potentials. And when it's upright in Libra, we see the potentials of what I can do with what I have here and now. When it's reversed, Saturn in Aries, It's what's coming at me. It's here to remind us that we want to have the vision of what's coming. Some of it we might want to dodge and avoid. There might be an asteroid heading towards our planet that we want to duck out of its way. Right? So we want to have that long-term vision to see what is coming from the future. And we can see what is coming from the future. We have signs, we have indications of the direction that we're going when we're open to it. So this is again telling us to stay open. The Eight of Swords was telling us to be emotionally aware. This is telling us to be visually, psychically aware, to be aware of what's on its way. And some of that we can feel emotionally as well. So this card is also telling us that we want to protect and preserve communal wisdom. Which is good, which is a possibility, yeah. We want to be the ones carrying forward the traditions for future generations, sure. But in this spread, that doesn't make as strong of an impression for me. Yeah, this card here is also reminding us that the environment might be repressive, might stymie inspiration. It might be asking for our own discipline to move forward. Rather than being inspired by our environment and the people around us in the upright, in the reverse, it might be an oppressive environment like that bird I was just talking about. And that we might require discipline, the discipline of Saturn. Now, Aries isn't so disciplined. The discipline of Saturn to move forward through this environment. That makes more sense. And as the environment can be a little oppressive, reminiscent of this card in reverse, we may want to keep our creation an internal event. To keep our creation, instead of out there in the world, between our hearts and our heads. Parthenogenesis. To have our creation, instead of be with the other, to be a parthenogenic creation. A creation that is inspired within, with our own discipline, and is gestated within, inseminated within, and develops within us, rather than out in the environment with other people. Does that make sense? It's reading from the book. It's reaching deep within to a place of transcendent motivation. The visionary invests heart and soul into the conception, gestation, and labor necessary to produce truly unique works. Let me read that for you again. Reaching deep within to a place of transcendent motivation, the visionary, that's us, the visionary invests heart and soul into the conception, the gestation, the growth, the development, and the labor necessary, the work necessary to produce truly unique works. And the time might not be right for that work to actually be produced out in the environment. Right now, it's still the internal process, the parthenogenic process of creation. Because we're not getting it from the outside. And sometimes we don't want it from the outside. Sometimes we want it to be an internal thing. Usually, we want our experience within the world is fodder for our creativity. And some of that fodder is still there in the parthenogenic environment. We've gotten nutrition, we've got nutrients stored in our unconscious and our hearts and our somatic mind, the body mind, the physical mind. Our mind is not only limited to up here in this gray matter inside of our skulls. There is a mind that is running throughout entire bodies that is somatic and affective, body and emotional mind. That has received all that nutrition from our experience in the world, and then internally, then we put the pieces together and we parthenogenically start to create and gestate the new thing internally without knowing that right now it's not the time to put it out into the world. A little bit reflective of last week's message of keeping our cards close to our chests. So we move into the Lover's card. Whoa, I'm sorry. There it is. The Lover's card. The Lover's card. Let me show it to you upright. This is Taurus, and we see two couples. One couple up above on land, very affectionate, very comfortable with each other, but also just comfortable with each other and enjoying the environment. Below, in the water, in the emotions, in the unconscious, in the thick of things, in the thick of relationship, we see a much more passionate couple in a passionate embrace. Libido, all manifest for both sun and moon, both conscious and unconscious, both male and female, both active and passive, whatever you want to consider the joining of this binary. And the sign associated with this card in this deck is Taurus. The enjoyment of the physical, the enjoyment of beauty, the enjoyment of what is, and abundance. And the drawing together of stuff, and the pleasure of that. In reverse, it's still Taurus in reverse, but this one, we've got the idea of, instead of opposites attracting, we have the magnet, one of the magnets reversed, so the similar repelling. Now, generally, law of attraction, opposites don't attract, like attracts like, and that is true. Now, we become the thing that is like the thing we want to attract. However, there are times when we are misaligned and we repel each other, and that's what this can be, the repelling of other, which might be the reason for this sense of an oppressive environment, is because we are right now repelling other people, or other people are repelling us. And so this card, because of that disjointed relationship in the exterior world, there is never a disjointed relationship. There is a less open, a less embracing relationship with our eternal selves and the divine, but there's never a completely disjointed relationship in my belief system. There's always a connection. We can disconnect from others. Okay, so I made a liar of myself. Every time we connect with another being here in the physical universe, that connection, I believe, is eternal. Whether we're actually physically communicating in physical bodies, or by writing or telephoning or sending messages, whatever, even if when we feel like we've cut somebody off, that cutting off is not the essential truth. The essential truth is every connection is eternal in my belief system. Because there is no disconnection in this. There is no disconnection. There is only oneness. Now, this physical world manifests within the oneness, but still, there is only the oneness, so everything is connected. So yes, I just made a liar of myself. However, in these physical bodies, in our human ego interactions, there are times when we repel each other, and there are times when we pinch off our connection with our higher selves and the divine. Yes. However, this card, in reverse, is here to tell us that we want to focus on our relationship with our eternal selves, with Sophia, wisdom, the divine wisdom, the feminine divine, the manifesting divine, the anima mundi, the soul of the world. We want to give our energy to that relationship rather than to the disappointment we might be feeling in our relationships in the physical world with other people, for example. Because there are times when situations are challenging and we just are not getting along with people as we hoped we would. But still, we have that connection to the divine, to self, to eternal self, to anima mundi, to Sophia, the eternally manifesting and rising Sophia, moving down and up the Kabbalistic tree of life. And we also want to remember that those right now unfulfilling relationships that we are experiencing in the world, they are also useful for us in our parthenogenic creations. Now, we're not exactly creating with those other people, but those reactions can be fodder for our own development, for our own growth, for our own evolution, and for the creation of what we are gestating within ourselves. And so, I believe this card is the central image, is the central idea. Parthenogenesis. There are times when we want to allow the possibility for creation to be an internal process. Because right now, at the moment, our interaction with the world is not feeding us for one reason or another. And have you ever noticed that when you feel like your relationships with other people or the situations you are in, they're not really comfortable, they're not happy, they're not mutually respectful or loving or even friendly. Because of that, we think, well, I just can't do anything now because I'm feeling so about my place in the world. Now, this spread is here to remind us that in those times, if we can turn our attention to our internal relationship with self, with the divine, this could be a potential time for amazing, brilliant, wonderful creation. Inspired and inspiring creation, inspiring for us, and perhaps even eventually inspiring for those around us, which would change the relationships we are having with those around us, with our environment, with our situations. Does that make sense? Can you see how that plays together? Have you ever experienced that sense of being unsettled, not knowing your place in the world, and feeling then, therefore, uncreative? Can you now see that there is another possibility? If we manage our emotions, open to our connection with the divine and self, keep our eyes open also to what's coming around us. We want to have our peripheral vision open. And still allow for a parthenogenic experience within. Like a hermit going into a cave. We don't necessarily have to go into a cave. It could be our own internal cave of self. Waiting for the right time to open back up. And when we can open back up, then that beautiful thing that we've created inside can move and blossom out into the world. So this week we're talking about parthenogenesis. And we've got 2 columns of cards on the sides, one for the sun, one for the moon. Let's move into the sunny side of the spread. Let's take a look. Here we are in the sunny side of the spread, and I don't know, did it look really sunny to you? Or was it a little bit unsettling? What did we get? We got from the bottom to top, the Fool, the 2 of Cups, and the 10 of Wands. The 10 of Wands. Now, what a way to top off the spread. But we'll get there in just a moment. So, what did we... Now, remember, this is a Rider-Waite-Smith-based deck, right? So, the Fool is very similar to Pamela Colman Smith's art of the Fool. Now, we've got... What do we have? It's beautiful, but let me show you. Take a look. We've got this beautiful, beautiful jester clothed figure. You know, we've got the jester's hat on top. They've got a satchel on a stick over their shoulder. They've got a flower in their hand in the back. Do you see this? Let me show you. Let's see. Yes, here it is. This flower right here. Do you see that? And there's a figure down here, a white figure. I suppose that's supposed to be the dog. It kind of looks like a seal to me, but I suppose that's the dog. And the figure is leaping off into the darkness. Yeah, in Pamela Colman Smith's art, what do we have? We have a figure about to take a step off of a cliff. The dog is nipping at their heels. The figure is holding a flower. They're dressed up like a very wealthy figure. And there's a landscape in the background. There are mountains, which could be obstacles. But the figure is about to take a leap into the unknown. Just like this figure. But here we also have something in the background. Yeah? The background, do you see this mannequin figure? Which is similar to what like an artist would use to sketch human figures in different poses. Yeah, you can pose these figures. They're usually about a foot high, maybe a foot and a half or 2 feet high. Little figures for artists to sketch and draw and practice with and set up scenes, perhaps. Do you also notice that there's this little red spot here, which could be a heart? Yeah, it's like this fool. This fool is leaping into the darkness away from perhaps a relationship here. Not fully seeing this figure as a fully formed, fully fleshed out person to be in relationship with, but rather a stick figure, even though that figure still has a heart. Which is interesting to me. So what is the Fool? The Fool, it's beginnings. It's innocence. Yeah, it's the innocence of the young or the newly born old people. Yeah? We can reclaim our innocence, our spontaneity, packing up our bags without a specific plan and just taking a trip, right? Free spirits. Taking the leap, a leap of faith into the unknown. Now remember, from the central column of this spread, this is not exactly the thing we want to do. Remember, we're reading from the bottom to the top. Well, I don't think I told you that. Logically, this side of the spread also seems to be moving from bottom to top. So this Fool is leaping into something. And this is not the time to be leaping out into things, right? The environment is constrictive. This is not a time for us to take risks and chances like that out in the environment. And this Fool seems to be leaping into the 2 of Cups, which is a little bit disturbing for me in this deck, and I'll get to that in a minute. But then again, this Fool could also, look, you'll notice that this Fool is not leaping into this clear, landscape of mountains or valleys or things like that. This fool is leaping into the darkness, the unknown, right? But perhaps this fool is also leaping into their unconscious, into their internal world, which does make more sense and which could be another reading for this card. In this environment, it's time to leap into self, into our own internal environment for that potential for parthenogenesis. Right? Does that make sense? Leap into the subconscious to discover what is there. Because right now, our relationship with these other people is not a fully human interactive relationship. We recognize that they're still human, they still have a heart, but still, they're not where our energy should be placed. We want to leap into the unknown, which is an internal unknown. That's another way to read this card. And so what is he leaping, what is he, what is she, what are they leaping into? They're leaping into this card, the Two of Cups, which is very different from Pamela Colman Smith's art, yeah? Pamela Colman Smith, we've got two figures, male presenting, female presenting, both holding a cup, and there's this floating lion head with wings and a caduceus above, and there's this idea of unified love, partnership, mutual attraction. Now, that mutual attraction could definitely be romantic, and often I want to move into the romantic side of this card, more than even the Lover's card, even in the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, which I usually move towards choice. But this one, I usually move towards partnership and romantic love. But it doesn't have to be romantic for love. It could also be friendship, the love of friends, yeah? Platonic love, or the love of a co-worker. It could be affinity for someone you work with, or someone you go out and drink with, or someone you play sports with. That kind of connection, the emotional connection. It can also be cooperation that moves within that emotional context. Now, in this card, actually, this card's a little disturbing to me. Yeah? Why? It's because of not because there's a man facing a man or a woman facing a woman. That's what it looks like to me. I like that. That's my jam. But do you remember cameras with film? You remember film? Do you remember taking pictures with those cameras and getting the film developed? And did you look at that developed film called the negative? A color or a black and white negative. Very similar in a sense. And that's what this looks like to me. These faces look like negative images. And that has always been a little unsettling for me. What should be light is dark. What should be dark is light. It just looks wrong to me. And so this card is unsettling for that reason, one. Because this looks like a negative image, and that unsettles me. Also, there are these, probably the creator intended these to be roses, yeah? A rose on this forehead, a rose on this forehead, a rose on the third eye, a love rose. What I see is also blood. It looks like, I don't know, like they got shot in the head, a little bit. That's my, I know I'm horrible, right? I'm way too violent, but that's what it looks like to me. This blood spurting out of their foreheads. However, I know that's not what the artist intended. So, in a sense, if this fool is leaping into relationship, this fool is really going in a direction that is not helpful for them. This is not the time to form relationships with others. In this environment of that central 3 cards from this spread, this is not the time to form relationships with other people. And we'll get to why in just a moment. However, there is another way to read this, I think. Now remember I just said this man it's a man facing a male figure facing a male figure, a female figure facing a female figure. That's how I see these. Potentially, and it could be two couples facing each other. It could be these two men being a couple, these two women being a couple. Romantic or not. But then, what if these aren't two men and two women, but one man and one woman looking at themselves? That internal relationship, which we did see in that central column of the spread, right? Relationship with self, relationship with Sophia, with the eternal self that we are. Maybe if this fool is leaping not into willy-nilly into new experiences in the world, but rather leaping into self, perhaps then what the fool will encounter in the self is self. And then bringing awareness to that internal relationship of self to self. That could be beneficial. That will be beneficial. That is what that is, I think, the basis for parthenogenesis. And then what do we move into? We move into the Ten of Wands, which is very similar to Pamela Colman-Smith's Ten of Wands. In her card, we've got a figure holding the wands in front of them and kind of leaning back in a position that just does not make sense to me. How is this figure carrying these wands like that for a long distance? I have no idea. But we can also see a homes or a village out in the near distance, not very, very far, near distance that this figure seems to be going into, and so we get the idea of a burden but nearing completion. In this card, we get that idea of a burden, right? We got this figure with this long hair covering their face. Looks like a female to me, but covering their face, with those sticks on their back, bent over. We don't see the houses in the distance. What we see are steps. Now this figure's got to go up steps, carrying all this heavy weight. And so, yeah, we got that idea of a burden, of extra responsibility, of exhaustion from labor. A very, very tiring looking thing, right? Hard work. Close to completion, maybe, but not completion. And so, going from that first way, my initial reading of these cards was the Fool takes a leap into a relationship with other people, and the result is it becomes a burden. Yeah? In this environment, from the central column of cards, of oppressive environment, restrictive environment, relationships being like two positive ends of a magnet repelling each other. This is not the time to go on Tinder or Grindr or whatever your romance app is and try and find something, to go out and get laid, yeah? Because that kind of an action is going to lead to burden rather than freedom. However, maybe there's another way to read this. Now, this figure, what do we see here? We see 3 steps. So maybe just take those 3 steps and put the stuff down and focus on your relationship. Now, this could be just a recognition of the environment. Now, the Fool leaps into a relationship with self and is aware of the environment and gets to the point where they can put those sticks down and focus on this more. Does that make sense? So we've got 2 potential directions for these cards to go. One, doing something, trying to solve this feeling of discomfort by hooking up. One way or another. Sexually, romantically, friendship-wise, going out to find a new friend, it's not going to work out well. However, moving internally, finding an internal relationship could help us find a way to set those sticks down and put our attention elsewhere. Still, being aware of the environment, we don't want to drive with our eyes closed, right, with a blindfold on. We want to be aware of what's coming towards us, but we also want to develop our internal relationship, parthenogenesis. Now, friends, we have the moon side of the cards, of the spread, the moon side. Let's take a look at that. If you were expecting the moon side of the spread to be sunnier than the sun side of the spread, we got another thing coming, right? You saw those cards, not the happiest cards in the deck. We started off at the bottom with the 5 of Pentacles, moved up to the 10 of Swords, and then we had the 6 of Swords. So this spread had a lot of swords, right? A lot of swords and a lot of pentacles. 1 cup and no wands. There's no, well, no, we did have one cup and 1 wand. But mostly it's pentacles, the physical, the creative, and the mental. So I'm going to continue reading from bottom to top. That seems to be the way this spread is laid out. So we start with the 5 of Pentacles. And this card is different from Pamela Colman Smith's. Pamela Colman Smith's card, we've got the figures walking in the snow in front of a church with a glowing stained glass window, but the figures have been beaten up. They're dressed in rags. One has a bandaged head. One is walking with crutches, very poor, very destitute, not healthy. So it's a card of loss, financial loss perhaps, poverty, isolation from resources, isolation from other people. Yes, they're separated from the potential help that lies inside of that church with the glowing windows. Here, what do we have? It's maybe a little difficult to see. There's this tree. You can see the tree. At the top of the tree, there are the discs, the pentacles. At the bottom of the tree, on this side, there is a figure in a cloak, kind of female-looking to me, crumpled down at the base of the tree, not seeing the resources that are above her, him, them. So it's that sense of also lackful mindset. Not being aware of the resources that are available to us and just feeling the poor, pitiful me, destitution, privation, hardships, being immersed in hardships and a little bit of a pity party for oneself or as a demonstration to others, how poor and pitiful am I. But it could be absolutely real. It could be absolute, true privation, deprivation. But even then, there is always a missing of possible resources of one kind or another. But it's understandable. It's absolutely understandable that we get caught in that whirlpool of distress and isolation and lack mindset. Have you ever experienced that on your own? Have you ever felt so sorry for yourself because you didn't have the money, the home, a car, whatever resource or resources that we need to feel safe and secure in the world? You know, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You have the base needs of food in capitalist societies, cash, housing, shelter, all of those basic needs. Have you ever been in a situation where you felt a lack of that? how much hope did you feel? It's a little, it can, for the most of us, it can be next to impossible to find hope in that kind of situation. I've experienced it myself. I'm not blaming anybody. We don't want to blame anybody for feeling this, for being here. However, we also want to realize that there are always resources somewhere, somehow. Did you get yourself out of that sense of that deprived state? I did. I hope you did. Now, it might not be the mansion in Beverly Hills that we immediately moved into, but we found a way to survive, to get our needs met to some extent. And if you haven't gotten your needs met, there is a resource for you. There are resources for you. Have faith, open your eyes and find help, find counseling, find help. There are resources. There are always resources. However, if you are one of the people who I think are probably watching right now, you found your resources. You found your way through. But there's always the possibility that we'll get there again. Maybe not as severely as it was before, the last time, but we'll feel a sense of lack in some sense, in some way. It might be a loss of a house. It might be a loss of money. It could be loss of some material item that we have held precious. Loss of a job. Loss of income. And so again, we remember that there are resources there. What we want to do is open ourselves to the possibility of finding them. And so when this happens, what happens next? Much of the time is this, right? The Ten of Swords. The Ten of Swords, which is different from Pamela Coleman Smith's art. And her art, there's a figure lying face down on the ground outside with 10 swords stuck in their back and blood flowing out. Looking even worse than the Death card to me. Here, it's not so bad. Now, this figure is not dead, is not stabbed. However, they are very unhappy. They're crumpled down to their knees and they are sobbing into their hands. They've got some swords in a basket. There are other swords around. So what is this card showing us? It's showing us painful endings, deep wounds, betrayal and loss. We can feel that when we're in that, where are you? The Five of Pentacles, the Five of Discs, the Five of Pentacles environment. When we're in this experience, this is often walking right beside or at its heels. Crisis. Sometimes melodrama. Sometimes, again, like I said, there is that potential for pity party, right? That melodrama of, oh my God, woe is me. And sometimes woe is us. However, sometimes we play the pity card, right? We play the pitiful card. We, either for our own benefits, and we go into our room and we cry ourselves into a fit of despair, or we go out into the world and we find people to cry in front of and hope that that will help get our resources, get what we want brought to us. So from the Five of Pentacles, this experience often follows hard apace. Understandable. Absolutely understandable. And that's partly what I think that Eight of Swords in this central spread is showing us the potential of. We could get there. if we don't keep ourselves emotionally balanced, emotionally stable. And so, what is the advice of the unconscious side? Yeah? Sometimes we're not fully aware that we've moved into a pity party, that we've moved into a sense of betrayal, loss, crisis, melodrama. And so what we want to do is the Six of Swords. The Six of Swords. Here, it's different from Pamela Colman Smith's art, where we've got 3 figures in a boat with 6 swords in it. One figure is helping the 2 figures move from rough water into calm water in a boat. The 2 figures are usually cloaked. The figure rowing is usually uncloaked, male presenting often. The 2 figures look to be an adult and a child in Pamela Colman Smith's art. Here we have 2 figures, could be an adult and a child, maybe not, could just be another adult of shorter stature. And instead of being in a boat, they're walking a path through the 6 swords. But ahead there is a door with a light. Yeah? In the heavens, there is a passage from this cloudy sky to light shining through the door. Brighter future. But still needing to, in here, move through those swords, which I actually kind of like a little bit better than Pamela Colman Smith's art, where we're carrying all those swords with us. Instead, here we're moving through the swords, through the negative thoughts, into the light. Now, there is some benefit to Pamela Colman Smith's interpretation also, that we do carry some of our thoughts with us. We want to recall that we don't want to completely, sometimes we do want to completely empty our minds, but sometimes we do want to keep moving with the thoughts, the ideas, the beliefs that do help us into calmer waters. Now, we don't have to start off with a clean slate. We bring the helpful stuff with us on our journey. But here she's showing us that we are journeying through our mental blades to something that's open and light in the ahead of us. In the ahead of us, yes. To something bright and shiny and light ahead of us. A door is open for us to move through. So this is the card of transition, of journey, pilgrimage, but change. A rite of passage. Yeah? Maybe this time of this being in this environment is a rite of passage for us. That we take the advantage of allowing for parthenogenetic creation. And yes, we want to release baggage. We want to release and move beyond this baggage, move into the light. Because that's where our North Star was, right? Remember that North Star, where are you, baby? That North Star, here. Now that North Star, here in this card, the Eight of Swords reversed, could be that door in this card. So, yes, right now, we're feeling the Five of Pentacles. And with the Five of Pentacles, there's the Ten of Swords, mental state. And yet, we can do the Six of Swords, move through. And take advantage of that journey for a little bit of creativity within. Preparing to bring it forth into the world when the time is right. Right? So, this spread is not going to leave us here. We've got 2 bits of advice. Let's take a look at the advice. What did you think of that advice? What did you think of those advice cards? Did you see one and burst out laughing? Now, this is a wonderful deck. I got this deck on Kickstarter. The deck is available off Kickstarter, but because I got this deck on Kickstarter, there were rewards, backer rewards. And one of the rewards is that for each backer of the Kickstarter campaign, each of us would receive a personalized card to add to the deck. And so mine was my name. So we got to choose a season. So I chose autumn as my favorite season. And so the card, and I shuffled it into the deck because that's what I do. And so for the advice on the conscious side, we got that card. Derek John Thomas's Bountiful Autumn. Beautiful card. I love this card. It's a lovely card of autumn with my name on it. Can't help but love it, right? And on the unconscious side, we had Small and Slow Solutions. Also a lovely card. So what does that mean? What's the advice? Well, first, before we get into the advice, let's take a little bit of a recap, journey through the spread. The central cards, what did we get? We got the environment is constrictive. Yeah, we're not getting along well with other people. That's okay, because what we want to do is be aware of where we're going, what's coming at us, so that we can dodge things that might want to be dodged. We don't want to, again, drive with our blindfolds on. We want to be open and aware and move with the current, because our powerful current of intention is going to move us in the direction around obstacles and potential hazards. But that is being sure that we're moving in that direction. It's really helpful to have the blindfolds off and be aware, right? So we are aware of what's coming at us. So we don't actually accidentally turn our boat out of the flow of the current. And at the same time, we allow for parthenogenesis. It's my word for the day, right? Parthenogenesis, allow for creation to happen within us. That fertilization, gestation, and growth and work can be done here. Knowing that it's not the time for it to be birthed into the world yet. So on the conscious side, we got two readings, right? Let's go with the help more advice side, not the caution side, but the advice side of that reading, which was, okay, so we take the leap internally and we dive into, we open ourselves to relationship with self. And we take whatever steps we need to take to be able to put down the burden that we're carrying so we can allow for parthenogenesis to happen. And on the unconscious side, on the less aware side, on the emotional side, we realize that right now, partially, the reason for, or maybe a reaction to the environment, or our perhaps the reason for our perception of the environment or our reaction to the environment is the Five of Pentacles. That deprivation, loss, isolation. And following hard apace with that sense of Five of Pentacles is the Ten of Swords. The wounds, the betrayal that we feel. We want to be aware of those so we can heal. So that we can move as the Six of Swords through these swords that are around us, but move through towards our North Star, which we also saw in that Eight of Swords reversed. It's there. We just want to keep our eye on it, keep our heart attached, feel that connection to it. And so to help us, we've got this advice. Be me. No. No, the advice is not to be Derek, but rather to allow for what I feel when I encounter autumn. When I encounter autumn, I feel a release. I feel an opening with autumn. Yeah? after a long summer, I feel a little bit of Ten of Wands, actually. I feel burdened. It's hard for me. Summer is hard for me. All of that heat. And yes, I'm a fire sign. I'm a Leo, so I suppose I should love the heat, but all of that heat is burdensome for me. And so when it eases and when it lightens up and when it starts turning cool, I open up. And I feel the bounty. Autumn is also a harvest time, right? So allow for the internal harvest. Allow for the internal opening. That's the advice. Just because we are not as connected with the environment and other people as we might hope to be or want to be, still we can be open to our own internal environment and our own connection with the divine, with self, with eternal self, and the bounty, the harvest that lies within, and we can create within that harvest, within that bounty, as using that bounty as resources for our own creation. Does that make sense? So unconsciously, that's where we can direct our attention. Not autumn as we're about to. Now, some of us, I know, when autumn comes, we start to feel depressed. We see the nights start getting longer, it gets colder, and some of us start feeling depression in autumn. That's not what this card is telling us to do. To be my autumn, to be that opening, that reveling in the harvest, in the bounty, and using those resources that are here within to create, which can come out into the universe at the thawing of winter. And then we have, for unconscious, the darker side, the nighttime side of the spread. The advice for that is small and slow solutions. Not expecting ourselves to move from the start line to the finish line of a marathon in 10 seconds. Even moving beyond the speed of light, well, maybe you would be able to do that, but we're not that. We're not movers at the speed of light or beyond. This card is here to remind us to take the steps, do the stuff. Now again, this is internal, right? Also externally. Begin with realistic expectations. Now, what does that mean? Realistic expectations. A lot of people take that as a very negative thing. Why can't I have wonderful, amazing expectations? Why do they have to be realistic? That's not what this realistic expectations for this card, that's not what it's pointing at. It's not pointing at the realistic as opposed to wonderful. It's realistic as opposed to fantastical. And now, even fantasy could be, oh, fantasy is wonderful. I can't believe I got so far so quickly. That's not what we're talking about. It's the thing that just is not going to happen. And yet we expect it to happen. And yet, again, if we can expect it, it can happen. But right now, in this spread, in this environment, we are not open to that fantastical, magical, instantaneous manifestation of results. We're just not open to that yet. Because we're still reacting to the environment, and that's okay. We don't want to beat ourselves up for not having instantaneous manifestation. That's not why we came into these bodies, to live these physical human lives. So we want to begin, because that's where we are right now. We've reacted to the environment, and what that environment, again, could be social, could be physical, it could be economic, it could be any kind of environment that feels binding, constricting, and oppressive. So this isn't the time because we're reacting to that, because we're noticing that, this isn't the time for expectations of instant manifestation. So instead, what we want to do is begin with the thing we know that we can do next. The thing we believe we can do next. The thing that we trust our ability to accomplish. That's what this card is reminding us to do, to move towards. Also, rushing is not what's going to help us right now. Trying to rush through those swords of the Six of Swords is not going to help us. We're rushing and trying to use excessive effort to either break through the Eight of Swords in the central spread or in the moon side to move through those swords on the Six of Swords is going to lead to us banging up against those sharp blades and getting cut. This is not the time for that. This is the time for step by step, paying attention to what's coming towards us. Is that a sword I see before me? And taking a step to the side and moving around it. Also monitoring our progress rather than our incomplete work. Yeah? What do I mean? Okay, let's go back to that Six of Swords here. That'll help. So, these figures, they're taking steps towards this light. They could do one of two things. They could be aware of, I took another step. I moved around that sword. I took another step. And congratulate themselves, appreciate themselves for the progress that they're making. Or they could look at, that door is way out there and I'm not there yet. Something's wrong. So this card is asking us to monitor our progress, not what we have not done. Monitor what we have done and enjoy, appreciate what we have done. We have all evolved. We have all expanded and grown and become who we are today, and that is a beautiful thing. And yes, there is still more ahead of us. There is still more evolution to be done. There is still more enlightenment to experience. That doesn't mean that right now we are not amazing, wonderful, beautiful beings, learning, growing, evolving, but also having experienced, accomplished, and grown and evolved a lot since the time that we were one cell dividing in some woman's womb. Right? You're a little bit bigger and more accomplished and able than one cell. I think so. You've accomplished so much. Do you recognize that? You have evolved so much. Can you recognize that? You have become aware of so much. Do you recognize that? That's also what this card is here to remind us of. Do you recognize that? And in recognizing that, do you see how you do have that rich environment within to create from what you are and what you have? If you do, I would love to hear from you. Let me know in the comments below. What does this mean for you right now? Friends, if you are still here, hit that thumbs up button so that YouTube knows that you and other people might enjoy this video. Also, hit the subscribe button and the alarm bell so you get notifications of when I upload videos. I do 2 a week. Sometimes I try and do 3, but this semester it looks like I'm only going to have time for 2. And also, comment below. I would really love to hear from you. Remember, in just a moment there will be a short video giving you the names of the creators and the names of these beautiful, beautiful decks. Take a look at that and check out the links below to see if you want to purchase one or all of these decks. And also, if you want a private reading from me, my email address is below. thehangedmaninthemoon@gmail.com, all one thing, all in small letters. So shoot me an email, say, I want a reading, and we can work it out. It can be a long, short, whatever you want. And friends, now, as always, I wish you love, joy, well-being, and pure awareness. Thank you.